There's only one country in the world you cannot do this test. Put on your red hat, because we need to fix things. The only place it's not yet approved is the US FDA. So you want to talk about making America great again? There's a great place to start, right? Not to be political or anything, but for God's sake, you can go to Mexico, you can go to Canada, you can go anywhere in this world and have this test done. You can't get it done here in the USA yet, and it probably won't be till the end of this year. So EndoSure is a company that sells an invention of mine, which is known as the EndoSure test. And it's a way of sensing the electrical energy coming off of your body as a result of contraction of muscle under the skin surface. And it allows us to pinpoint specific diseases. So for instance, EndoSure specifically, why endo? Endo is short for endometriosis. And sure, of course, is to be certain that you have the correct diagnosis. And, we're talking about a test that is completely disruptive, right? And the disruption point is no one was able to diagnose it accurately before. Now you get an immediate diagnosis instead of waiting 8.5 years. And you get that in 30 minutes. And it's completely non-invasive. And that's the beauty of the test. It's unique, and it's really making a difference for the women who suffer from this disease. Now, how did we get there is an interesting story. I have a number of inventions. One of them was known as the electrogastrogram, which does the same thing, but it looks at stomach motility, stomach actions, stomach contractions. And then we can subdivide disease. The problem with disease is it's not just one disease. Each disease has a series of subsets that are slightly different based upon your genetics and other associated conditions. And so the beauty of subtyping disease is you can say, all right, you've got subtype A, and that one responds to this treatment 100% of the time, as opposed to being lumped in as there's no cure for this disease. And so we had already done this for the stomach, and a colleague of mine came to me and said he discovered a higher frequency set of frequencies that appeared to be specific for endometriosis. Now, endometriosis, right? This is when the lining of the uterus ends up in other places like your brain or your abdomen or your pelvis or joint space, and it causes severe pain. People miss basically a quarter of their lives because it's menstrual associated, and it's very, very hard to diagnose. And the current standard diagnosis was surgery. Now, astoundingly, the surgery is only 50 to 75% accurate. Well, people are walking around, right? So there's your surgery. Your goal is, there it is, 50 to 75% accurate. And we come along as a little upstart that we are and said, all right, well, we've tested this on a few women, and now we've tested it on over 5,000 women. And we know that this frequency pattern is a fingerprint that's specific for the disease and no other disease. And so we are sitting around about 99+%. I'd say 100% accurate, but nobody likes 100%.
Right.
You can't say that. So, okay, 99+%.
That's too.
Yeah, it's too accurate. I mean, there's always going to be some outlier. We haven't found one yet, but when we do, I have a bounty out for false negatives and false positives because we want to find out how they got into that category. But it's really very simple, right? 30 minutes. You drink a glass of water, it activates your intestine, your guts start moving, it broadcasts this signal, which is like spasm at these specific frequencies, and then we sense it. And 30 minutes later, you have a diagnosis instead of the average of 8.6 years from the time of your symptoms until the time someone sees you're so bad that they can find it surgically.
So you've saved us 8 years, 5 months, 1 day, and 23 hours. So, I mean, that's incredible. I want to show briefly the website you've got.
So the product, you can see on the abdomen of the young woman 3 dots.
Okay.
Below her shirt. Those are the pads. They're like standard electrode pads. Everyone's had an EKG. Okay. So these are just not wet. These are dry pads. And the device itself is that handheld device that you see off in the side there. It's called a tricorder 3L. So, when I invented this, since we were sensing energy coming off the body and making a diagnosis, I thought, well, this is very Star Trek-y. Let's call it a tricorder 3L. We'd call it a tricorder, except that, Matt, that the tricorder is a trademark of CBS because of the Star Trek series. So by adding the 3L to it, we get around that.
I assume JD is also a Star Trek guy.
No. No, I'm sorry. You guys it's all good. I can.
Are you a Star Wars guy?
Not a Star Wars guy. I've seen the movie. I like movies. Yeah, see, I know.
Mark, forget about this guy.
It's okay. But so you're hovering over the body and sensing disease. And eventually, this will turn into the patents that we have, because it's a patent show. We should talk a little bit about patents.
Agreed.
As I've got 10, 12 apparatus and method patents that are associated with this that basically say, if you're anywhere in the body and sensing energy that turns it into a diagnosis and a recommended therapy, that's my domain. And so it's a pretty big domain. And one day we hope that you're going to sleep in a bed that will sense the energy, tell you what's wrong, what's right, put the energy back in to fix it. And then maybe you don't need doctors or medicine or surgery anymore. That's where we'll eventually go.
Time out here. So this sounds a little woo-woo. Okay, what do you mean sensing energy? Help me understand what that actually means.
Well, your body gives off energy from what happens inside your body. So for your knee, let's take your knee as an example. Your knee contracts when you bend your knee, 7.4 cycles per minute worth of energy. It gives that energy off because your muscle's moving, it's expending energy, and that energy is then reflected outside your body. And in fact, those
heat. I mean, we're talking heat.
No, literally, it's energy. It's like hertz. Only that's like 0.04 hertz, right? So we're talking about very, very low spectrums of energy. And the thing about that energy is your body needs to see that normal energy to initiate normal reparative processes, right? So we'll go back to the knee. If your knee can't contract normally, then you can't generate 7.4 cycles per minute of energy, and your body will not repair the normal damage done every day, and your knee will just get worse and worse and worse and worse. And interestingly, there actually is a device that was put out in the market since 1985, where if you wear a pad on your knee and it puts that energy back in while you're sleeping, it will regrow your cartilage, reverse your osteoarthritis, and you won't have to have your knee replaced. So we already have a number of things like this in the market that work this way.
And your device doesn't necessarily do that type of thing to the stomach of women. It just detects.
We're detecting. And all of this, it's far more complex than this. See, the endometriosis tissue that's abnormal secretes these things called neurotransmitters. And those neurotransmitters get in the way of the normal contraction of the bowel, and they make it contract much, much faster. So normal would be 10 to 15 contractions per minute. Then think like when you have dysentery, really, right? You're having bad diarrhea, severe pain. Your contractions are now 40, 50, 60, 80, right? And so that's what endometriosis does, is it stimulates almost like a pseudo dysentery pattern that's unique for the disease. And what's even cooler than that is that it's genetic. So for instance, if your daughter had endometriosis, she would have a very specific pattern frequency. Maybe she's a 20, 40, 60, and your wife would have the same pattern if she had endometriosis. But your neighbor who may have endometriosis might be a 15, 60, 20 in terms of the patterns. And so it's just so cool because it's your body. Literally, there's so many varieties of this disease. I'll give you a number. Because of the secretion of these substances and how they affect your body and generate this type of energy, there's 10 to the power of 50 types of endometriosis. That's like 40 zeros.
Yeah, that's basically infinity.
It's just like a higher selection.
Which is why this disease is so difficult to diagnose and to find a cure for it, because there's too many varieties of this disease. Now, what we're doing is we're for the first time diagnosing the disease quickly. And then the really cool thing is this reaction takes place over time, and then it decreases over time. So it gets better, it gets worse. We sense that. And so when it's abnormal, we tell you it's abnormal. And let's say you have surgery and they cut it all out. It goes back to normal again. Let's say you take a medicine that works, that actually destroys the tissue. It'll go back down to the normal range until you stop taking the medicine, and then we measure it coming back up because now you're symptomatic again. So not only do we diagnose it, but we can tell you the effect of your therapy. And that's for the very first time also. There is nothing else like that out there.
That's wonderful. So post-surgery, you can sort of see whether they're back and being symptomatic, sort of a post-op.
Exactly. Now let me take you back in history. And so ask the question, when was this first noticed? Because I always tell people in medicine, if you want to know the future, look way back into the past, because they already figured it out 200 years ago.
Be careful not to invalidate your patents here, Dr. Noor.
What's that?
Be careful not to invalidate your patents here.
No. There were no patents back then.
Has it been more than 9 months since your patents have issued?
Well, I'm good for the next 25 years. I'm good.
All right.
So you have to go back to, right? We're 102 years away from the discovery of these waveforms from the Mayo Clinic, from this one particular physician who published this in 1922. And it took us all the way until 102 years later to say, hey, we can diagnose endometriosis and tell you if you're getting better or worse. So you don't necessarily have to have surgery or anything severe done, because you can track your disease holistically.
I spoke with you before, and I know this answer is kind of loaded with questions, though. You can't just easily say, we can diagnose endometriosis. Tell us a bit about the FDA regulations and the testing you had to do to be able to make such claims.
So the testing that you have to do is you have to actually show that your device works for what it does. So we took the data from the original study where they were putting a tube down the woman's nose for 24 hours and measuring contractions from the inside of the bowel. And that's how the original discovery was made, that these abnormal frequencies were just endometriosis. And then we take the same patients, we put the electrodes on the outside, and we match the same signal. So we know that what's inside, we're matching from the outside.
Three-prong lead.
Yeah, it's just 3 leads, just 3 electrode leads. And so now that you do that, you have to say, all right, well, how do we know this is the only disease that does that? I mean, the original study was only 50 patients. So we spent 10 years studying over 4,500 women and men, because nobody ever knew these frequencies existed in the bowel, and every other kind of disease you could think of, to say, is there anybody else out there that does the same thing? Because if you're going to market it as diagnostic of endometriosis, you better make sure, it doesn't also mean the same thing as a hangnail. You have to be careful, because gallbladder disease is in the 12 to 18 cycle per minute frequency, which overlaps with the 15 to 20 that's part of what we sense. So what do you do in those cases? You just don't use those frequencies. So you focus your frequencies you focus your diagnostics on the higher frequencies. So this way you don't end up with a concomitant or a confusing disease. And then, to be doubly sure, you sense it, and then you go find it. So then the surgeons get to go and find it and say, okay, yes, you were right, or no, you were wrong.
Now, on that topic of, you on purposely kind of cut out that gallbladder frequency. I mean, there's some this device likely could be helpful for lots of different diseases, right? Not just this one.
Well, we talked about the knee, right? We talked about endometriosis, and yes, other diseases, everything that's an organ that has smooth muscle, your bladder, your uterus, your ureters that carry the urine from the kidney to the bladder, everything has its own specific contractile feature, and we can measure that. And then we can measure when it becomes abnormal, and that's how we get to the concept of sleeping in a bed that senses all your tissues. Are they moving at the right frequencies?
Wow,
They're awesome. Not. Do what the knee device does. Throw the energy back in. Tell the body, repair this. It needs to be fixed.
That's pretty cool. See, there's a future where we're all wearing tinfoil bed suits. Tinfoil.
If Amazon not tin for maybe it'll be a ring. Maybe it'll be.
And look, let's get a little silly, maybe even a little bold. How long could that prolong life? Is that a life prolonging type of thing, or just a quality of life thing?
If we can determine the individual healthy frequencies, the frequencies of health for every physiological process in the body, and sense when it's abnormal and send it back to normal again, you could technically live forever, because it's those frequencies that cause the reparative process. Look what it did to the knee, right? And
I'm gonna go grab my wallet.
Now, remember the olden days, what did they tell you if you injured your knee, right? It was ice, immobilization, rest.
Yeah.
Right. Today they don't do that. They don't do that because of that knee device that showed that you needed those frequencies to make the knee repair. Now you're back on the field in 24 hours. So they give you pain medication and they make you work your knee out even harder, and then it repairs itself.
Well, Mark, here, the truth is, I hurt my knee last year. They're still not telling people. I had to have surgery. Whatever the devices you're talking about, I don't believe they're mainstream.
No,
What kind of injury do you have in your knee? Maybe it's a
This was it was an infection. We don't know what caused it, but it was an infection in the bursa.
but that's different, right? So infections, you're not going to fix with electrical energy.
Okay.
Right, that's an outside pathogen that's inside your body where it doesn't belong. But
Okay.
if we go back to the knee device, they did I got turned on to this study. So here I am, I'm in Baltimore, I'm practicing medicine, and I get called to survey a study. And this is at Johns Hopkins, and they took 100 patients who would normally all be going for knee surgery because they had degenerated cartilage and osteoarthritis, inflammation of the joint. And they put these patches on everybody, except they only turned them on half.
Okay.
And the other half didn't, and nobody knew who did and did not have it. At the end of a year, the ones who had the patches turned on at the right frequencies for 8 to 9 hours a night, their arthritis went away. They regrew their cartilage, and they didn't need the surgery. And the ones who did not have it turned on all went to surgery because they never got better. So now, why is that now not mainstream?
I mean, clearly to be the conspiracy guy, right? It's big pharma.
Well, it would be big device and in collusion with physicians, with big medical, because guess what? They get paid a hell of a lot more money replacing knees than they do making sure they don't break. There's a lot of that out there, but you do what you can in the area that you can, and so you try and invent as much as you can to make life better for people.
The patent world, the initial value quality exchange is, hey, you give us your idea, we're going to give you this potential monetary benefit to exclude others. Is your effort here monetary, or is it kind of philanthropic, or both?
I did this. I'll tell you Wendy's story. I'm 12 years old, right? Let's see, 12 years old. That was 1965. 1965. I'm 12 years old. I noticed, right, the girls by the swimming pool, they're not swimming every so often. And so you learn quickly, okay, that's called menstruation. And so I went to a friend of mine. Her name was Wendy, and she's sitting by the swimming pool, and she's not moving. She's like arm against the wall, like not moving. And I went and I sat down next to her. Now you're 12. Now you're 12. You don't know a lot, and your emotions are all mixed up anyway. And so I sit down next to her. She turns to me. She's got tears in her eyes. She's sobbing, and she collapses into my arms, crying and in pain. And I said, Wendy, what's wrong? And she said, and they didn't even know what the disease was, right? This is 1965. They didn't even know what to call it. She said, there's something wrong. Every time I have my periods, I have severe pain. It knocks me out for 3 or 4 days. The doctors don't know what it is. They don't know how to fix it. And they said, eventually, maybe as I get older and have some kids, maybe I'll get better. And I looked at her and I thought, what do you say to someone who just told you that their life is screwed up until they get much older? And you're 12. She's 12. And I said, Wendy, I'm going to be a doctor one day. I already knew that. I said, I'm going to find something to fix this for you.
Yeah, you're going to fix this or invent a time machine.
I'm going to figure something out for you. And I promise you. And so I end up figuring something out. And it came to me. Now, poor Wendy, this is like this past September, we have all this great data. People around the world are using the device. They're confirming our results, right? And I'm thinking, okay, it's time to call Wendy because she needs to know this. Poor Wendy passed away in the summer, unbeknownst to me. There's your inspiration. And if you want other inspiration, how about the first time we demonstrated this in Europe, we go to Denmark, and they bring in a 19-year-old woman who's been suffering since the time she was 12. She's been taken to the emergency room, 911, multiple times every year. They can't find out what's wrong. And so what's the conclusion? Well, you're crazy. So you need to see a psychiatrist. So she's seeing a psychiatrist, and the family is angry. And the family says, God damn it, she's not crazy. She has pain. We've seen it. And they say to the family, ready? You're empowering her. You all need to see a psychiatrist together. Right? So here you are. They bring her in. There are 21 people in the room. They hear about this miraculous new thing we have. There's the family, brothers, sisters, doctors, nurses, administrators, all these people. We do the test, and I turn to her. I want to tell you 2 things that are true. 1, I'm sorry to say you have endometriosis, and 2, you are definitely not crazy. Now, you want to talk about emotional? There were 21 people in that room. No one could speak through their tears. Imagine that.
Wow.
Now you know why. Are you doing this altruistically? You're damn right we are. And are we going to make money at it? Yeah, we are, and we deserve to, so we can develop the new testing, the new cures that go beyond just testing and discovery. But how about fixing the problem?
Sure.
Because now we know the frequencies, we can figure out what works.
Oh my gosh, Mark, that's so powerful. That story. Thank you for sharing that.
Very
Powerful. Really, really cool. I want to allow anybody that's listening, maybe after the fact, that caught this, if they want to get started on this, they can, I imagine, go to endosure.com. Is that the best place for them to go if they need help?
Absolutely. There's you can read about the test. Our studies are published; they're listed there.
Okay.
But I'm going to tell you, if you want to have this test done,
Yep.
as it stands today in the world, there's only one country in the world you cannot do this test. Put on your red hat, because we need to fix things. The only place it's not yet approved is the US FDA.
Wow.
So you want to talk about making America great again? There's a
Yeah.
great place to start, right? Not to be political or anything, but for God's sake, you can go to Mexico, you can go to Canada, you can go anywhere in this world and have this test done. You can't get it done here in the USA yet, and it probably won't be till the end of this year.
Yeah. So, Mark, I want to ask you about that, because that's something when we talk to medical device inventors, we hear a lot. The FDA is slow, right? We're going to Europe first. We're going to get EMA certified first, right? Or European Union. Can you talk to us a little bit about your choice to start in the EU with your clinical trials?
We started everywhere. Our clinical trials were done in the US because you don't need the FDA to do a clinical trial.
Okay.
Right? Because you're not marketing it as a device to be used clinically. You are doing a trial to determine, does it work? So you just need an investigational review board who oversees things, which is what you do.
The efficacy of it.
So you're looking at efficacy, you're looking at the accuracy, you're looking at a number of things. And so then you go to the countries and say, hey, can we get this approved? Here's the data that we have. And you go to the UK and they go, yeah, this is fantastic. We need this. And you go to Australia and they go, oh, well, we're putting $514 million into this whole disease and its diagnosis. We're going to put this device in every one of the primary care clinics in the country. You go to Brazil, for God's sake, and they immediately adopt it. And that's one of the hardest countries to get anything approved. You go to the EU, next month, we get EU approval. And there's millions of dollars in back orders waiting for that approval. But in the USA, they don't even think endometriosis is worthy of breakthrough consideration at the FDA.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Why is that, Mark?
Well, because that's just the way they are. I think that's the best. I hate to make the parallel to the trademark office, but it's just the way it is. In order to have a breakthrough designation for your device, you have to have a disease that's called a breakthrough disease. Now, what does that mean? Incurable, and it bothers the woman for most of their life. So they said, well, this doesn't apply. I said, really? It's incurable. Most women suffer for it from the time they begin having their periods until the time they die. And there are periods where you may feel better when you're pregnant and other things like this. And they said, that's exactly it. You can get pregnant, you can breastfeed, and then you can go into menopause and you will feel better. So therefore, it's not bothering you your whole life. I said, okay, now let's listen to that message. Get knocked up for 35 years, breastfeed the whole time. You'll be menopausal at that point, and then it won't matter that you have the disease. And so that's not what we said. I said, I've got it here in writing. This is what you say.
Yeah, this is that's not going to fly.
Okay. So what do? Okay, you back away because it's the FDA, and you say, fine, we'll come back again and we'll do something else. Now, do you want to know what a breakthrough disease is?
I do.
You hear the stories, right? Women are out with their girlfriends and everything's cool and they're having a drink and someone tells a joke and someone wets themselves.
Yeah.
Okay, that is a breakthrough disease. Mild, recurring, intermittent urinary incontinence. Not to take that away, it's a terrible thing to have.
Yep.
But as opposed to 10% of your workforce can't work 1/4 of their life because they're writhing in bed every day. Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry.
Interesting.
And so that's the problem that we have is we have often an unsympathetic organization that stands in the way of an approval.
Now, do you get special privileges to be called breakthrough versus just a regular disease?
They give you a little bit more attention, and you get to announce that you're breakthrough. So it's good for marketing,
Okay.
but it doesn't really change. You still have to go through the same thing. And so, that's what we're doing. We're going through the same thing that everyone has to go through. And eventually it's going to work out. But it's very hard to believe that you show the same data to agencies that are extremely, extremely scrutinizing in their data, and yet in your own country, which has most people, you know what our endometriosis, it costs $28 billion a year in direct costs and $55 billion a year in lost productivity. But that's not good enough to be breakthrough.
Seems like a miss there.
Yeah, it is a miss. It is a miss. I haven't had any opposition to any of the patents, but we have a David and Goliath situation. Do you know it?
I'm looking at it right now.
Right. So we have the David and Goliath situation. We have this. We put out a trademark for EndoSure. Actually, I made a mistake the first time. I put it out as a 44, and it should have been a 10. Right.
Yep.
So because it's not a service, it's a device.
Not service, your product.
Right. But I got approved as a 45.
Nice.
Hey, well, yeah. What are you going to do? So we put it back in as a 10, and all of a sudden, someone's opposing us
I saw that.
on the last possible day. Why? Because we believe that we're the only company that's allowed to use the word sure in the gynecological space. And because we say so. And so that's where we're sitting. And so, and that's where I kind of call the trademark office is kind of like the Wild West, because it's the only place, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you're being opposed against, you have to prove you're not causing harm. The people who think that they're having harm caused to them don't have to show how, or the amount, or that it's even occurring. They just have to say, we think.
Is that right, Matt? The burden is
to make the allegation, on information belief, right, is kind of the standard we typically have to meet, right? Probable cause in some level, right? But yeah, they have to prove it at some point, right? During the discovery and then the argumentation at the end. But,
yeah. So you're a startup company, you're raising money, and you're making traction, and some multi-billion-dollar company comes by and says, "No, we want to own that space. You can't have it. Give us your name, give us your website, give us." And you just looking at them like, "Okay, I don't have $1 million to play your game, but I'm going to end up having to try and find it," because I mean, it's mind-boggling to think you can be bullied by a company that really doesn't have a claim.
Yeah, I mean, just, quick back of the napkin analysis here. I would not say that any of these present a likelihood of confusion to your registration, your application.